I think I'm really happy that we're making actually a kids game and that we're making kind of an open world kids game because it sort of like liberates you, and like, you know, now that I have my own kid, like it brings you back to your own childhood, right? And when you understand like you're making it for them and that you essentially are a toy maker, you're building something that they get to enjoy, it kind of changes your approach in how you're building games. And I found it really very refreshing and kind of, you know, it brings some of the spark back into how we make games. My name is Stefan Baier. I'm one of the founders of the studio and the executive producer on this project. I did grow up sort of on a village, and it was kind of hilly. There was like vineyards on the top and then the houses in the bottom of the valley, and you had these little valley rivers kind of going through, and the kids would go and like build dams and play with the water. And like what I found out recently actually is I was a kid and I found a dinosaur bone. At least I thought so. A dinosaur head, which was this big head skull that actually turned out to be a cow, you know, that I found somewhere in the dirt when I was digging around, and I thought it's like a cool treasure. and so I took it home, and then, you know, what happened with my career is like by 18 I left home, right? Like I went overseas, we started the company. I was 18 years old when we started Streamline. And like my mom at one point calls me like years later and she's like, we found a skull when we were moving out of our apartment. Like, do you know anything about this? So they eventually found the cow skull, I guess under the sink. I must have placed it like 10 years prior. And they were a little shocked what is going on. But then that was my dinosaur discovery. So that's how it all connects together, yeah. Malaysian food, I think, is nasi lemak, to be honest. Yeah, like I had that from the very beginning, and it just is really tasty. The sambal sauce is really good. I had my mom try it, and she like hates it. Like she's like, it doesn't understand the taste. It doesn't compute to her German tastes. But for me, like, it's actually really good. Yeah, I love it. I have a outdoorsy Malaysian wife that I have acquired here in Malaysia since I came here in 2009. And she works with animals, with elephants, tigers, turtles back in the day. So she's always kind of dragged me to the parks and the reserves and, you know, kind of experiencing that sciencey life. And now we have a kid, and she's like, we're going to go jump in a waterfall, go to this river in the middle of nowhere. And I'm like, okay, I trust you, and experience the kampung life through her. And at this point, you know, it's a good balance because our kid grows up in the city, but we do want to bring him out to the countryside. So yes, I have. I think when I was a kid, I grew up on a village in Germany too. You know, it was like 3,000 people or something, and there have been cats, some chickens and stuff. So yeah, I think I have been chased by something, vaguely remember something, or more like intimidated by it, and it's like dogs and stuff like this. So yeah. I mean, a kampung is exactly like a German village, but, you know, at least there's green, so it does remind me of that. I think I'm really happy that we're making actually a kids game and that we're making kind of an open world kids game. It's something we didn't know initially, like, is this going to be aligned sort of like with the kind of games we want to make. But then you look at our actual history of the games we have made before. Actually, they're sports games, they're kind of global games, you know, they would have that kind of international spirit. But something that is specifically made for kids, I think, was really interesting because it sort of like liberates you. And like, you know, now that I have my own kid, like it brings you back to your own childhood, right? And when you understand like you're making it for them, and that you essentially are a toy maker, you're building something that they get to enjoy, it kind of changes your approach in how you're building games. And I found it really very refreshing and kind of, you know, it brings some of the spark back into how we make games. Because when you work in our industry, as you know, our industry can be like ridiculous sometimes, and there's a lot of like jaded people in the industry, and the business side can be quite unforgiving. And so I always find it refreshing when you go to like an event like PAX or something, and you actually just meet players and you see the wide eyes and the enthusiasm, and they don't see the polygons and the bugs and the Jira tickets and whatever the hell we see. They're just like, this is fun, I enjoy this, right? So that coming back with the playtests and seeing that side of it to me was really refreshing, and we'll keep making kids games because of that. like I said, I also grew up on a village, and I think there's some universal appeal in terms of just the sights, the sounds, the green, the immersion. We also made some intentional choices, like it doesn't have a lot of indicators floating in the air. Like you don't have like a VR headset, you're not like a cyberpunk game, as much as like you bring the map up sort of analog. And you remember this maybe back in the old times, we would have analog maps, right? I remember like delivering papers to the neighbors with a paper and then being like, where do I have to deliver this? And then getting chased by some dog probably in the process. Those memories are quite universal, that you're on bikes, like there's also like, you look at like Netflix, Stranger Things or something, outside of the horror stuff, it's actually the nostalgia that makes it work, right? So being on bikes, going around in the village, and these are all things around the world everyone can kind of connect with, right? That is family values. We're all humans, believe it or not, there's like 8 billion of us. And I think there's almost like a hidden desire for many people to go back to nature a little bit. We live in the city and we don't know what we lost. And when we show this game to people, let's say we went to Singapore for this kind of meeting with these high-flying execs in suits and stuff, but it's still Singaporeans, so they remember back in the day when Singapore also didn't look like it does now, skyscrapers. They remember the kampung era, and they saw the game and like they changed it, like, oh wow, this reminds us of like home and this, and look at this and look at that, and they just kind of connected with this. And so I think it brings out the inner children in us, and I think that makes it really valuable and very global. Open world games are pretty difficult to make, and traditionally you would be using custom engines for a lot of them, and we helped make some of those games. We also worked on Cyberpunk, on Saints Row, and a couple of other open world games, so we cut our teeth on that. Final Fantasy 15 to some degree, open world, generally custom engines back in the day. Over the last few years, the Unreal Engine has really become very comfortable in building open world environments, and because we've been working with Unreal for like 20 years or more, this to us was a really good alignment. So we looked at that, we said, okay, we can, within certain constraints, actually pull off an open world. And looking how that hasn't really been done much for kids games, we said this is a great opportunity to bring this into this new field and actually have a really interesting game that no one else has kind of made like this. I think obviously for us as a team, we had to learn more about what makes this world kind of function, right? Are we going to go hard on the action side, like the movie? Are we going to go very heavy on the nostalgia side? Is it a game for very young kids that is very safe and contained? Are we leaning more into the kind of nonsense and kind of messing around and kind of troublesome boys, like let boys have some fun, throw chairs and things like this and cause trouble for grandma? Is it a nostalgia focused product? The truth is it's all of that. And we learned a lot from LCP, and sort of the way that they would explain it is, think of it as something that just exists in the living room, that is for the entire family. So the kids might sit there and play the game and cause some trouble, but then grandma sits on the couch and she's like, oh boys, why are you guys doing this in the game? You shouldn't do this. And the commentary and the interactions and the kind of laughter there, that's part of the experience, right? So it was important for us to have confidence to add features, especially after playtesting, that don't follow a strict mechanical game design purpose. It's just there because it adds some fun, it adds some flair. It makes the game feel more lively, right? The fact that the game has a durian you can pick up or a ball that you can kick, it doesn't serve the progression of the main quest, right? But it enriches the entire environment. And so for us to find confidence in building features that just do that was important. And then that has been validated by the playtesting, because the playtesters, we build their own quests and they're like, oh cool, there's quests here. I'm going to jump out the window and cause trouble and do whatever that we didn't plan for. We're like, okay, then we have to anticipate that. So I think that was part of it for sure. I think that's pretty easy, because I think, again, nostalgia is pretty universal. And so when you hear, like, our teams you're immersed in it's not nostalgia. Nostalgia is a word, but this is just the lives that we have lived, or that especially Malaysians here have lived and grew up with. So for them, it's their own experience they're bringing to it, their own richness. And so it's the foods, the sights and the sounds. And so I think that was really easy for them to immerse that in there. And there would be things like, oh, you don't put palm trees next to houses because Malaysians wouldn't build a house right next to a bunch of trees because it'll be bothered, things fall down. And also durians tend to be on the outside of the kampung. These are the things you pick up sort of as you're kind of immersed in the design conversations. And again, that, once we understood what we're building, we leaned into that because it creates this kind of authentic energy that makes this feel like it's built, or like it really just comes from the soil of Malaysia or the soil of Southeast Asia, instead of someone Googling images of like, what's life in Asia like? That's not, not going to work. I think I would like players to feel a sense of freedom and independence, and then get immersed into this world. So they can just run out, right? So like I said, you're in the sandbox and you just roam outside. One thing that we've seen with a lot of the playtesters, or maybe some of the people coming now, and they're like, I'm going to find the boundaries. I want to see where the box pushes back on me. And they can just keep running and running and running, and it'll take a long time before they hit any boundaries. And I think that is the satisfying feeling, that you assume that it's only this little box, but they can keep running and have that sense of exploration and just roaming around. And that is a very powerful feeling, that grabs you and holds you. So in the game, obviously, you have a strong focus on single player. We think a lot of players want to maybe have a friend over or someone, and we do cater for this. And it is obviously two twins and they want to hang out together. But we do know from our previous games as well, data will show that there's a lot of people that want companionship, that want to be in this kind of peaceful, fun world, but don't necessarily have someone that can come right now to be there with them. So this is also where I think psychologically it feels very powerful that you can play in single player and have always a buddy with you, and the buddy's talking to you, chatting you up, and then you go into this really friendly, safe, relaxed world. And so that's the single player focus there. I think it's in our design philosophy. So early on, we did have a more stricter design that more or less had the adults kind of telling the kids what to do, go do this quest, do that. So it became a lot more mechanical. But from the playtest, from the kids, we learned like this is not, they respected, like, yeah, this is obviously the show they grew up with, but they're like, I'm in this world, I'm just going to go run out, right? So I think by respecting that and leaning into like what they want, what their expectation is, going out there and the animals and the food and the interactions and the colors and the sights, it is not going to really get lost, because as long as we're not getting lost when we're building this wide open space, and we're immersing it in the food and the colors and the sounds and in the memories of people that really have been there, not getting lost in the machinery, the mechanics, of how you might build a more complex kind of single player game, this is not really going to be a problem, I think. I think we, for the first time, had to like nail down the map, like where things actually are. So you get a spatial awareness, and I think that will be really fun for players. Like they can be like, okay, to go to Mail's house, I go down this path on the bike, and then I'm here, and this is next to that river. And I think that making the place a lot more real because of this. The way I see it is actually an interconnected network. Like we're building a bit of a simulation where all of the mini games have actually a part of the economy to play in. And calling the mini games is maybe almost a bit misleading, because for example, you can find bugs here. The bugs can be used to capture certain fish. These fish then go into the cooking mini game, which is actually just crafting. It's crafting these recipes, and then as we have our roadmap, the idea is you can then sell, maybe later on you can sell these recipes in the market. You can use it to upgrade things in the kampung, upgrade your houses, or give things to your friends and things like this. So to me, the most exciting part is that we've managed to lay down the foundation of interconnecting a lot of these mini games together into something interesting. There could be other things later, maybe in the racing, you unlock maybe recipes or blueprints or things like this. So there are ways of using them as sources and interconnecting it, and that to me is very exciting. I think the most challenging part was when we did that pivot after some playtesting that made it very clear we need to remove boundaries. So early on, we had some prototypes where we thought, maybe it's too difficult to walk into the water, so we just put like a box around there, or a fence, if you will. You cannot go into the water. And then we said, you know what? The kids want to just explore and immerse and go swim. And like we said, this is sort of the kampung life. And so we had to remove those fences and allow them to go swimming, and then in the same place, they can go swim, they can go fishing, they can go exploring, they can throw things into the water. So having all of these systems on top of each other turned out to be one of the most complex things, but also very satisfying, because once it works, it feels like much more of a real place. For the first 90 days, it's going to be absorbing all the feedback. Like I said, this is a long-term roadmap. So give us all the feedback. We already have a plan for the patches coming out. We know the game has a certain amount of bugs. The open world kind of shows us this. You know, we have many different personalities of players. Some love the story, some love the physics, others go just exploring and anything in between. And that creates a lot of different behaviors. And we need to make a lot of the mechanics more robust. We know we're going to get feedback on fixing a lot of bugs. We have obviously polished the game already a lot, but there'll be more beyond this. Beyond just sort of the feedback on bugs, we're going to be looking at gameplay expansions. To me, in more technical terms, so the end game meta game is going to get expanded ideally. If the game hits the way that we want to, there's going to be more work on the economy of how things can be crafted and then sold, and this can be used to enhance the game. We're looking at that. We're looking at new locations. Characters and storylines, and what we would call in season 2 is sort of beginning to get planned further, and it's going to be an exciting time. I think a new generation of kids, they are already growing up with Fortnite, Roblox, and all of these kind of living ecosystems of games, and they go on Discord, you know, to chat with their friends while they're playing these games. And so I think for any property now to go into this interactive medium is really exciting for them, because it allows to sort of put everything into like a new context. All the old shows, you know, like season 1, 2, 3, you know, from an initial perspective, that is already like a long time ago. But now this can be all fertile grounds for bringing it into this interactive environment, and it all kind of gets refreshed and becomes exciting again. Like, because suddenly, like, it turns into like, oh, remember from season 2, you know, this one location, cool, let's bring that in. You know, it's like how Marvel movies are based on comic books. You know, they're based on existing kind of vetted, you know, this could be 30 years ago. You can totally refresh it and put it into this new context, and it totally works, right? So we're doing something similar here, but then it, of course, reinvigorates the series going forward as well, because we're learning more and we're putting everything into this new language that everyone benefits from. I would say all the new friends of Upin and Ipin, this is really created for you guys. It is a game that is made for all ages, for all families. It is meant to bring you back into that world that maybe you thought got lost. We're bringing it here. You know, Lesko Park is very passionate about this world and this world going forward into the future. And I'm very glad and happy to have this opportunity to bring this world to you, and kind of to also learn so much over the next few years on where we're going to be taking the stories from here, because this is going to be a collaborative process. And already we got so much feedback. It enriches us too, to learn and to build something that is a unique piece of art. And that's how we want to see it. And it only can get there when you guys tell us, what about this, what about that, how do we enrich this world going further from here. Yeah. Well, there's like and subscribe, as it usually is. There's our Discord, which we're active on. The website as well has subscription forms. You can find ways to contact us. Overall, just find a way to ping us. We have developers directly in the Discord talking to people. Again, like I said, we know this is a stepping stone to bigger and better worlds of Upin and Ipin. So let us know and be in touch.